Just because I, Camille Miller, lost my engagement ring, my CEO fiancé, Xavier Thornton, decided to cancel our wedding to teach me a lesson. As if that wasn't enough, he publicly announced that he would marry his assistant, Kimberly Scott, instead. But on their wedding day, I saw my lost ring on Kimberly's finger. Before I could even question her, she burst into tears, claiming I had it out for her and was framing her on purpose. To prove her innocence, she tearfully submitted her resignation. Xavier, desperate to console her, did something even more outrageous. He called for a company-wide meeting, live-streamed it, and publicly criticized me. He called me jealous and unworthy and announced that he would strip me of all my shares to compensate Kimberly for her emotional distress. Otherwise, he'd really marry her and leave me with nothing. The entire office was in shock. The way they looked at me was full of pity. They all thought I would obediently give in to him again. But this time, I simply clasped my hands together and said, "Well then, I wish the two of you a lifetime of happiness." The moment the words left my lips, Xavier froze. Then, his expression darkened, and he slammed his hand on the table. He grabbed a stack of papers and threw them in my face. "Camille, stop with the sarcasm. You did the wrong thing, yet you show no remorse. Do you believe I won't fire you and kick you out of the company right now?" Whispers filled the room. People pointed at me, murmuring among themselves. Everyone has already become accustomed to this kind of scene. This had happened so many times before. Even though I was Xavier's fiancé, he never hesitated to humiliate me in front of others whenever he was upset. Over time, people stopped respecting me, but he still wasn't satisfied. Later, he even deliberately posted edited clips online to make me look bad. I had swallowed my pride and helped him build his company from the ground up, yet because of his video, people were calling me an arrogant, incompetent trophy wife. The live chat was flooded with hateful comments from every direction, all aimed at me. Kimberly, his assistant, couldn't hide her smile. It took her a moment to suppress her amusement before she strolled forward, casually shutting off the livestream. Then, she turned to Xavier, feigning concern. "Xavier, don't be so rash. I've already forgiven Camille. Besides, no matter what Camille did, she's still your girlfriend. I don't want to be the reason you two fight." Xavier's expression had been somewhat conflicted a moment ago. Perhaps he regretted speaking too harshly to me in front of everyone. But after hearing Kimberly's words, he let out a cold laugh and shot me a look full of disdain. "She takes advantage of the fact that she's my girlfriend. She thinks she can do whatever she wants just because I spoil her. Camille, tell me, am I wrong?" I scoffed inwardly, too tired to argue. It didn't matter what I said. He would only stick to his version of the story, convinced that I was being unreasonable. Seeing that I stayed silent, Xavier took it as an admission of guilt and dismissed the meeting. Once everyone had left, he sighed and looked at me as if he were genuinely disappointed. "Camille, I really didn't expect this from you. Not only did you refuse to admit your mistake, but you also embarrassed me in front of everyone. I'm really disappointed in you." This was what he always said after scolding me, like a script he had memorized. At first, I believed him. Every time, I would reflect on my actions, wondering if I had truly done something wrong, until I realized that my self-reflection was just a trap, a way for him to test my limits. Each time, his punishments only grew harsher. "What exactly did I do wrong?" I asked, my voice calm. "You and Kimberly already had your wedding. What's so wrong about what I said?" Xavier's expression froze for a split second as if he hadn't expected me to respond this way. But then, he sneered. "People weren't wrong when they called you petty. That wedding was just for publicity. It wasn't real. After promoting it for an entire year, we couldn't just cancel it at the last minute. What would people think? Honestly, you should be thanking Kimberly. She went out of her way to find the wedding ring. Since you were out of town, she stepped up and played the role of the bride to keep the public from asking questions. You weren't even half as invested as she was. So tell me, where do you get the nerve to throw a tantrum?" His tone was righteous, as if he truly believed he was making perfect sense. I couldn't help but laugh. That wedding, the one I had spent 3 whole months planning, was something I had poured my heart into. I handled everything from the grand decorations of the venue down to the tiniest details, like picking out the candy for the guests. Back then, he had insisted I had too much on my plate and might mess things up, so he forcibly handed the wedding ring to Kimberly for safekeeping. I protested, but he turned it into a big argument about how I didn't trust him. Later, the ring mysteriously went missing. The guests had already arrived, so I rushed to get a replacement. But instead of thanking me for saving the situation, he accused me of being careless about the wedding and started a huge fight. Then, without another word, he stormed out. I had no time to dwell on my emotions. I had to stay behind, keep the guests entertained, and make sure everything went smoothly. I didn't even get a chance to breathe before he sent me off on a business trip out of town. And now, as always, he was pushing all the blame onto me, putting aside the fact that Kimberly clearly wanted to marry him, something everyone could see except him. The ring had been in her hands. If she wanted to hide it, I could have turned the entire city upside down and still never found it. Before, I would have argued my case. I would have stood my ground and tried to make him see reason. But this time, I was exhausted. I didn't want to waste my breath fighting over something he already knew deep down but refused to admit. "Xavier, don't blame Camille. I did all of this willingly." Back in the conference room, she naturally walked over to Xavier's side. "I've been with the company for so long that I already see it as my home. The company's business is my business, and of course, that includes whatever happens between you and Camille." She smiled as she spoke to Xavier, then sighed with a hint of grievance. "But I really didn't expect Camille to be this upset this time. I guess this is my fault." As soon as she said that, Xavier's gaze softened. "Kimberly, you're just too considerate." He let out a sigh, then turned around and shot me a sharp glare. "Camille, do you see that? Look at Kimberly's attitude and then look at yours. Why can't you learn from her?" I said nothing. Xavier had always defended Kimberly. She didn't even have the qualifications to apply for the job, but Xavier went against all opposition and brought her into the company. Everyone had to call him Mr. Thornton, even me. Only Kimberly was allowed to call him Xavier. She made countless mistakes, yet he always shielded her. He even pinned the blame on me just to keep her in the company. Everyone saw how much he protected her, so they followed suit, making me her scapegoat time and time again. I had no idea what I was supposed to learn from Kimberly, just as I had no idea what to say right now. Xavier sighed. "Enough. I don't want to argue with you. You falsely accused Kimberly, and now rumors are spreading all over the company. She's a woman. If she weren't strong-willed, this could have ended badly for her. Our company has never wronged an employee. As compensation, sign this contract." He slammed a share transfer contract in front of of me. You don't deserve these shares anymore. They should go to someone more capable. Kimberly's eyes lit up, though she still pretended to hesitate. Oh, but how could I accept this? Why not? This is what you deserve, Xavier said righteously. I almost laughed out loud. This company was built with my initial investment. I was the one who worked around the clock, securing funding and developing projects. And now, with just a few words, he wanted to hand everything I worked for to someone else. I let out a cold chuckle as I picked up the contract. He thought I had given in. I saw the flash of satisfaction in Xavier's eyes, and Kimberly's gaze stayed locked on my hand, anticipation flickering in her expression. Under their watchful eyes, I raised my hand and tore the contract in half. Then, I took out my phone and dialed the police. Xavier's eyes were fixed on my fingers. The moment he realized I was calling the police, he reacted quickly, snatching my phone and ending the call. Camille, why are you calling the cops? He looked at me, frustrated. His nervousness was almost funny. Clearly, he knew he was in the wrong. I scoffed. Didn't you say I falsely accused Kimberly? Then let's have the police come and find out who's really at fault. While we're at it, they can investigate the missing diamond ring. With all the security cameras in the office, it won't be hard to get to the truth. A flicker of panic flashed in Kimberly's eyes. Xavier opened his mouth to argue, but Kimberly grabbed his arm and whispered, "Forget it, Xavier. We're all colleagues. There's no need to escalate this to the police. We don't want to make a scene and embarrass the company." Xavier's gaze softened as he looked at her pitifully. Then he turned back to me, his face darkening with anger. He jabbed a finger at my forehead and snapped, "Camille, you're getting worse and worse. Consider yourself lucky that Kimberly is mature enough not to stoop to your level." The ever-mature Kimberly took the opportunity to shoot me a glare when Xavier wasn't looking. Then she smiled sweetly and said, "I'll get back to work now. Xavier, you and Camille should talk." She finished speaking and turned to leave. Watching her back, I could already imagine the smug smile on her face. She knew that Xavier wasn't just talking to me. He was also standing up for her. As soon as Kimberly walked out, Xavier started scolding me, saying I was no match for her. He accused me of growing pettier with age, unlike a young girl who knew better. After venting his frustration, Xavier finally pulled out the diamond ring from our wedding. His voice was heavy with meaning. "Do you really think I favor her over you? Everything I do is for your own good. I just want you to rest and make sure we keep the best talent for the company." Saying this, he reached out, trying to slip the ring back onto my finger. Looking at him now, so gentle and sincere, I knew that the old me would have believed him in a heartbeat, but not anymore. I could see what it was for. It was just another sweet gesture after a hard blow. I let out a soft scoff and dodged him without hesitation. "Kimberly lost over $8 million for the company, and you call that talent? Xavier, tell me, is it me who needs to rest, or is it you?" "You." His face turned red. He wanted to explode but managed to hold himself back. "If that's how you see it, then there's nothing left for us to talk about." With that, he threw the ring at my face and stormed out. I knew what he was doing. He was giving me the silent treatment. This was his go-to tactic whenever he was in the wrong. He used it to force me into apologizing, into giving in. But this time, I wasn't anxious or afraid. I didn't scramble to fix things. I simply glanced at the ring on the floor, now crushed under his heel, then turned and walked out. That night, Xavier still hadn't come home by the time it was past midnight. Meanwhile, Kimberly sent a message in the company's group chat. "The new luxury car Xavier gave me is just stunning. Hard work always pays off. Keep going, everyone. You'll get there too." Attached was a picture of her beaming in front of a limited edition car, with Xavier beside her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. His eyes were full of admiration, his smile sweet. Colleagues flooded the comments, liking and congratulating her. At the very end, Xavier himself left a cute emoji, along with a message. "This is a reward for your outstanding performance. You earned it. I just wish some people would learn from you." There was no need to guess who some people referred to. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was deliberately trying to make me jealous and force me into submission. A female colleague couldn't help but message me privately, "Camille, what's going on? I thought you and Mr. Thornton used to be madly in love." I recognized her. She was one of the earliest employees who had fought alongside Xavier and me. She left years ago to focus on her family but had recently returned when I rehired her. Her message stirred up old memories. "Back then, Xavier and I were in love. When I was sick, he stayed up for 3 days straight, watching over me. When I craved green mangoes, he worked nonstop for a whole week, then drove across state lines just to buy them for me. On my birthday, he went all out, surprising me with a luxury car in the middle of a busy street. That car was over a decade old now, worn out, just like our love." I didn't reply to her message. Instead, I quietly packed my things. Since I had already decided to leave, there was no reason to hold on to anything. I sold what I could and threw out the rest. In the end, all that remained were our photos. After a moment of thought, I took out a fire pit. One by one, I tossed the pictures into the flames, watching them curl and burn. Just then, the door swung open. Xavier walked in, his eyes fixed on his phone, a small smile on his lips as he typed. When he saw me, the smile on his face disappeared on purpose. He glanced at me and spoke with clear disdain. "Why are you here in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? Got nothing better to do?" I knew he was frustrated because his attempt to provoke me had failed, but back when we were still in love, he would sometimes go out late at night to meet friends. I couldn't go with him, but I knew he was afraid of the dark. So, I would leave the lights on and fight off my sleepiness, waiting for him in the living room. Back then, he would always hold me in his arms when he got home and tell me how thoughtful I was. Love and indifference were obvious at a glance. I didn't explain myself. I simply continued burning the photos in my hands. Xavier never liked taking pictures. Most of them were taken because I had begged him to. I thought he wouldn't care, but to my surprise, he suddenly showed interest, leaning down to take the photos from my hands, flipping through them one by one. "When were these taken?" "I don't remember any of them." He looked surprised, and for some reason, his tone softened. "This one, my side profile looks pretty good. Who was the photographer? Why does this one look so funny? You look like a little fox. Camille, look at you back then. You were so cute, all chubby and adorable." He reminisced to himself, his smile unconsciously growing. I didn't respond. 3 seconds of silence passed. Then, as if suddenly realizing we were still in a cold war, he cleared his throat and frowned slightly. "Why are you burning these photos?" "I don't need them anymore," I said calmly. "Come on, don't think I don't know what you're doing." Xavier smirked confidently, stood up, and shoved the photos back into my hands. "You did this on purpose, so I'd see it, didn't you? Stop being stubborn. Bring your ID tomorrow afternoon. We're going to City Hall." His tone was arrogant as if marrying me was some kind of generous favor. I let out a cold laugh and tossed the rest of the photos into the fire. The last remnants of our past were completely consumed. Xavier's brows furrowed instantly. What are you doing? Xavier, Before I could finish, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his eyes lit up. Without hesitation, he walked into the bedroom to answer. Laughter drifted through the closed door. I stood outside, staring at the pile of ashes left from the burned photos. Just like our relationship, nothing but dust. Nearly half an hour passed before he finally came out, still smiling. There's something at work. I need to head out. I'll probably be back late. He tried to keep his tone casual to avoid giving anything away, but I knew exactly who had called Kimberly. Over the years, he had used work as an excuse to meet with her countless times. I didn't expose him. I just nodded. He went back to the bedroom to change, even spraying on cologne. One phone call and he had completely forgotten about me. Forgotten about the photos I burned. Oh, right. What were you about to say earlier? He finally remembered when he was about to leave, pausing by the door to ask. I can sell my shares to Kimberly at market price. Ask her if she wants them. I thought for a moment and spoke. Xavier's eyes lit up with excitement. Are you serious? I nodded. He quickly stepped toward me, cupping my face and kissing me hard. You're being so good today. I knew it. Deep down, you still care about me. I'll tell her later tonight. The moment the words left his mouth, he realized how inappropriate they sounded. He quickly corrected himself. I mean, I'll call her and let her know. I pretended not to notice the slip and wiped my face with disgust. Do it soon before I change my mind. Xavier agreed, grabbed his car keys, and left. He was in such a good mood that he even started humming. Less than half an hour later, I got a text. Kimberly had agreed to buy the shares. I wasn't surprised that she agreed. The company was doing better and better, and the stock value kept rising. Even if she didn't have that much cash on hand, Xavier would help her get it. Free shares were something she couldn't bear to give up. That night, Xavier didn't come home. I wasn't sure if they were celebrating, but in the middle of the night, while I was sound asleep, my phone rang. Half asleep, I answered. On the other end, I heard Xavier's heavy breathing. Nearly 10 seconds passed before Kimberly's playful laughter came through. Xavier, you don't even like Camille anymore. So why are you still getting a marriage certificate with her? There was silence for 2 seconds before Xavier responded in a low voice. We've been together for 10 years. And she did as I asked. She handed over all her shares. Breaking up now wouldn't be right. Ugh, don't bring her up. It kills the mood. The call ended. I stared at the disconnected screen, knowing full well that Xavier had no idea about this call. It was Kimberly's doing, a deliberate move to provoke me. This wasn't the first time. Telling Xavier wouldn't change anything. He trusted Kimberly more than he trusted me. I could even predict that he'd change his mind about the marriage certificate by morning. I set my phone aside and went back to sleep. The next day, I continued packing my things. It was nearly evening when Xavier finally came home, looking tired from the day. Camille, something urgent came up today, so I couldn't make it to City Hall. It wasn't on purpose. You're not mad, right? There was a faint scratch on his neck. The urgent matter was obvious. I shook my head. No, I'm not mad. I had already prepared myself for this. I didn't go either. After all, that's good. He smiled and handed me a document. I've finalized the stock transfer contract. Let's get this done first. Maybe he was worried I'd change my mind out of anger. He seemed a little anxious, but I pretended not to notice. After checking that the terms were correct, I signed. As I finished signing the last page, he let out a relieved sigh. The same man who always delayed things immediately called a lawyer to finalize the paperwork. It had taken nearly a week to transfer the shares to me. This time, it was done in less than half an hour. The shares were now under Kimberly's name. The money was in my account. It was over. Xavier was in a great mood, even looking at me with a softer gaze. You look exhausted. I was thinking we could wait until tomorrow for the marriage certificate. But since you've been so good today, I'll take you now. Smiling, he reached out and pinched my cheek. Happy? I slapped his hand away without answering. Instead, I turned and walked to the bedroom, pulling out the suitcase I had packed long ago. Xavier frowned. What are you doing? Don't tell me you've already planned our honeymoon. Camille, I agreed to marry you, but a honeymoon is out of the question. I'm too busy right now. It's not a honeymoon, I said calmly. I'm moving out. Xavier, we're done.